GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. This is Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. Today we will be discussing the case of the mother who this week lost her case as she attempted to make a sex education charity publish a lesson it taught her daughter. I'll be joined by the renowned free speech campaigner Michael Schellenberger, and in the duel my panellists will be discussing whether or not the Church of England has gone woke. My sidekick Emma Webb, your initial thoughts?
Has the Church gone woke? Is that even a question? I think that the Church of England have gone so far down the path of no return that they're making the most convincing argument I've ever heard to become a Catholic.
Oh gosh. My nemesis, Aaron Bastani. What's your immediate reaction?
Well, I try to demur from attacks on denominations of which I'm not a member, but I think we're in a moment where people need principles, values, and frequently in the senior levels of civil society in this country, we don't see them, and that includes Justin Welby.
But before all of that, here's the news with Ray Addison.
Good evening. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. The National Education Union has announced more strike action next month. On the 5th and the 7th of July, teachers in England will walk out in their long-running dispute over pay. The NEU is also reballoting its members to see if they want to continue taking industrial action for the rest of the year. Thousands of people are marching in central London, calling for a change to UK abortion laws. They've been chanting for the release of Carla Foster, who admitted to taking abortion pills after the legal time limit, resulting in the death of her child. The 44-year-old mother of 3 was given a 28-month extended sentence. Some MPs are calling for a rethink over UK laws that ban terminations past 24 weeks, except in exceptional circumstances. The man charged with the murders of the 3 victims of Nottingham's knife attacks has been remanded in custody. 31-year-old Valdo Kalokani is accused of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates on Tuesday. He's also accused of 3 counts of attempted murder after 3 other people were injured when they were hit by a van. Police have named 4 people from the same family who were found dead in a flat in West London. Although formal identification is yet to take place, they're being named as 3-year-old David Vodacek, 11-year-old Maja, 35-year-old Monica and 39-year-old Mikkel. Officers forced entry to a property on Staines Road yesterday after concerns for their welfare. Met Police says it's not seeking anyone else in connection with that incident. Well, the King has celebrated his official birthday with the nation during his first Trooping the Colour ceremony as a monarch. 8,000 spectators surrounded Horse Guards to watch the military parade, which dates back 260 years. For the first time since 1989, all 5 regiments of Foot Guards, that's the Welsh, the Scots, Irish, Coldstream and Grenadier, paraded together. It's around 1,500 soldiers in total. It was also the first time that a monarch has ridden horseback during the parade in more than 30 years, the last being Queen Elizabeth II in 1986. Members of the royal family waved from the balcony of Buckingham Palace as thousands of people filled the Mall to cheer. 70 aircraft from all 3 armed services took part in a flypast, including 18 Typhoon fighters, spelling out the King's monogram, CR, standing for Charles Rex. Spitfires, Hurricanes and a Lancaster bomber also graced the skies over London earlier on. The Red Arrows, of course, providing the finale to that occasion, trailing their signature red, white and blue smoke. Earlier on, we were speaking to members of the public who watched the spectacle, and they were telling us how much they enjoyed it. OK, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. So let's get straight back to Father Calvin.
This next topic is of a sensitive nature. I'm not normally one for trigger warnings, but this isn't a woke topic. This is a matter that will personally affect many people. This week, the story broke of a mother who was jailed for having an abortion after the legal limit. The woman in question ordered abortion pills by post, ending the life of her baby when she was 8 months pregnant. The legal limit for abortion in the UK is 24 weeks. She was 2 to 3 months over the legal limit. This is fraudulent on her part and irresponsible on the part of the clinic. I would say this is a reason mother and baby deserve to be seen by a doctor. Mail order medicine in this situation is entirely inappropriate. There has been uproar in the media because the mother was arrested, charged and sentenced, with many commentators claiming that this is a reason to decriminalise abortion in the UK altogether. If anything, this is proof the current system is working as intended. She broke the law and she went to prison. If there are no consequences for breaking the law, what is the point in having laws? Without a legal limit, what is to stop a mother ending the life of her baby a day before he or she is born, or even the day he or she is due to be born? If we go that far, what's to say we shouldn't allow parents to end the life of their baby a day after birth? Where do we draw the line? I would draw it at conception. Feminists have repeatedly chanted, "My body, my choice," at anyone who dares to engage in this sensitive conversation as a way of shutting down the debate. I hope I'm not the first to enlighten them that this is not a conversation about women's bodily autonomy. We're not talking about the mother's body here. We're talking about the baby inside of her. I know many people who were born prematurely, earlier than 8 months, in fact, who have gone on to live very fulfilled lives. The baby we are talking about in this instance was perfectly viable. Some people have argued that the baby would have been unwanted. The value of a life isn't determined by whether someone else wants them or not. I've had a few people in my DMs this week who've let me know that they were unwanted until they were born, and their parents were surprised by how much they have loved them. But even if that was not the case, there is always another option. There are so many couples who want to care for and love a child but cannot have one of their own. Adoption is a wonderful gift to both the baby and the parents. My sidekick Emma Webb has already engaged in a debate on this topic earlier this week and argued her position perfectly. Here she is debating with Bev Turner with diametrically opposed views. I will not be commenting on Bev's stance.
A child that is between 32 and 34 weeks is a viable baby that is a human life. If the child had been born and there was a horrible situation during lockdown and a mother had murdered her own baby, and that would be infanticide, you wouldn't therefore say, well, you know, the mother was having a hard time. I'm sorry, but you have to have certain protections, whether you're anti-abortion full stop or whether you have a reasonable moderate view on abortion. After 24 weeks, the reason why the line is there in the law is because that is a viable baby, that is a human life, and your reproductive rights as a woman do not extend, and your bodily autonomy, I have to say, does not extend to murdering another life.
I obviously completely disagree, because the risk, if there's anything that we learnt during the pandemic, it is the idea that bodily autonomy, what you decide to do with your body as a sentient adult human female, must trump all other laws, governments, regulations, and this story is tragic.
But what about the bodily autonomy of the child? Does the child not have a right to its own bodily autonomy?
But Emma, if you take that to its logical conclusion, and if we are living under a government who decides that if you get pregnant, you as the woman, your rights are irrelevant now. That child's life trumps your human sentient existence. I think that the sentence was way too harsh.
Shifting gear now a little bit, it's been another busy week for the Church of England, but instead of helping the poor and needy, the talk has mainly concerned Pride Month, climate change and transgenderism. We already know many churches celebrate Pride Month, but Bristol Cathedral has now been hosting Extinction Rebellion at a multi/non-faith ceremony. Let's take a look. Meanwhile, the Church of England has appointed its first transgender archdeacon in the shape of the Reverend Canon Nick Mann, who has been appointed Archdeacon of Bolton and Salford. Mann is now the most senior trans member of the clergy, which all leads to this week's duel. Joining me now are my duelists, my sidekick Emma Webb and my nemesis, co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Aaron, I know you said you don't like to dump on other denominations, but has the Church of England gone woke?
Has it gone woke? I thought we were just chatting off air while we were watching that video a moment ago, and I said, this is very retro. This is like 14th century medieval church. You know, Savonarola, he was a demagogue in Florence, and, you know, he was saying it's the end of the world and whatnot. Look, we probably have very different views on climate change. I think it's a hugely salient, important political issue. However, what I would say is the role of the church, the role of religion is about moral instruction. And we have never had a bigger vacuum for moral instruction, how to live a life of meaning and principle and purpose, particularly for young men. And that gap is there, and it's getting worse. And people admonish, quite rightly, I think, individuals like Andrew Tate. But the point is, people like that are filling the vacuum and the gap that the big historic institutions of civil society are meant to be, you know, doing themselves. So I think it's good the church acknowledges the reality of climate change.
Does this fill that gap?
I just don't think it's their role. I don't think anybody particularly cares if the church says, yeah, we're going to have, you know, atmospheric concentrations of CO2 mean that we'll have rising sea levels, blah, blah, blah. They care if scientists say it. They care if the next door neighbour says it. But, you know, some church down the road, probably not.
OK. Emma Webb, I don't recognise that as my faith. I don't know what religion that was, but it wasn't Christianity.
Well, I think this is the problem. It's not that the church is woke, it's that the church is no longer a church. It's no longer Christian. It's been completely infested with ideas that are either extraneous to Christianity or actively opposed. And so you mentioned this trans archdeacon. Now, for me, the issue here isn't that this person is trans. The issue is that some of the writings of this person, as has been pointed out by many people on Twitter today, are so blasphemous. They are so contrary to and disrespectful, I think, in many ways. And now, I don't think that somebody shouldn't be able to hold opinions that are blasphemous. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying that this is indicative of the fact that the Church of England, never mind having sort of lost contact with its doctrine, its traditional Christian roots, has gone so far to basically becoming a non-Christian organisation that these sorts of things don't really even matter anymore. They don't really even shock. And I think that you see this footage of this sort of weird pagan ceremony taking place in a church, and you think, well, it's not that long since there was a putt-putt course and a helter-skelter in one of the cathedrals. And so what do? I mean, someone like me, and you know this very well, Calvin, because as soon as I saw this, I said this to you, that I'm thinking, can I be in the Church of England anymore? I don't know if I can be, because I don't think that they're really... It doesn't matter whether or not they're standing up for what is true or the gospel. I just don't think they're standing up for anything. I don't know if they even know who they are anymore.
I would say they are standing up for things, but not the gospel.
They just identify as Christian.
Well, indeed, I left over the critical race theory stuff, but the transgender stuff and the climate stuff is becoming bigger than ever. That transgender archdeacon does make a difference, because there's no such thing as trans in the church. You quite rightly mentioned that he's publishing some weird stuff. Here's one of his prayers. Holy God, chuckling wise woman, first blasphemy straight there, tender and strange, we bless you. Bless us, trouble us, bewitch us into delight with your love, mercy and grace. Christ, our sister, unite us in your holy bleeding, as you took spit and dust for healing. Take our hands, cracked and huge as washerwoman's for God's work. Take our sacred bodies for the healing of the world. It goes on. I can't even read it to the end because it's just so blasphemous that it upsets me. This person's been promoted to an archdeacon. I know you're not in this denomination, but come on, even you can see that is heresy that we're seeing right there.
The climate stuff is more interesting to me.
Deflection.
No, I'll tell you why. The climate stuff is interesting to me. No, because St. Francis, right, who the Pope is named after, he was the patron saint of, effectively being at one with nature, a great respect for animals. As the hymn goes, I'm sure many of your viewers and listeners are familiar with it. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, the Lord God made them all. Now...
Good assembly hymn.
Oh, fantastic. One of the best. You belt it out, don't you?
Banger, absolutely.
Oh, banger. But here's the thing. I don't see why an appreciation for God's creation and nature and the world and all creatures and respect for all life is at odds with a belief in climate change and, as an appendage to that, a collapse in biodiversity. We're losing plenty of species, a loss of natural habitat, etc., etc. I think St. Francis would find that troubling. And, he's one of the quintessential saints in the Catholic Church.
Let me push back on that and pose that as a question to you then, because the issue that I have with that weird red vested cult that I saw there, and they did have vestments, they had liturgy, they had hymns, I would say that's a cult. The issue I had with that is because they're not worshipping the Creator, they're worshipping his creation, and that's what makes it a Gnostic heresy.
Interesting point.
It is Gnosticism.
It's broadly correct. Yeah. Conceptually, I think that's probably right.
I was hoping you'd disagree. Thank you. Go on, Emma.
No, I think it's Gnosticism, not just on the climate change stuff, but on all of it. This is what I mean when I say that I think these extraneous, non-Christian beliefs are becoming dominant within the church. And you experienced this yourself, Calvin, because you were basically pushed out by it. But I think that when you... and Aaron, I would say that I would identify as a Christian conservative environmentalist. I believe, then, of course, that you should be a good custodian of the planet, and that's what the Bible teaches. Yeah. But that is not this environmentalist, climate catastrophist cult that we're seeing. And I think that the problem here, and going back to some of the things that have been written by this archdeacon, suggesting that Mary regretted having given birth to Christ, that the angel didn't want Mary to say yes to being impregnated with Christ. These are things that are so off the rails. They are so far off the rails that my only observation is simply that the Church of England is having such a profound identity crisis if it thinks that these things fall within the sphere of the Church of England and its doctrine and the gospel teachings, that it's so far off the rails that it's sort of ceased to be itself. Yeah. And that's not to say that people can't hold heretical views or write things that are blasphemous.
The teachers can't, no.
But it's just that the Church of England itself doesn't know what it is anymore.
OK, Aaron, I'm going to put this to you, because this Nick Mann, this archdeacon, there's two issues that I have here. One is the blasphemy, the prayers, the writings, and in some of them he has admitted that he has a mental disorder of gender dysphoria, so he has admitted that. The second issue I have with that is that the Church has affirmed his mental illness rather than supporting him and encouraged him in a stance that I would say is antithetical to the Scriptures. I would say that the Scriptures teach us that God made us in his image, God made us male and female, and there is no such thing as trans. And actually, we are our bodies and our souls, and the idea that we are in the wrong body is an affront to God. The idea we can change into a different sex, change from something that he created us, will be an affront to God. Where do you put that? How does the church reconcile that? How does the church say, well, actually, we think this is a good thing and we're going to promote it, even if the scriptures are against it?
Well, I personally don't believe that. I don't personally agree with that. And what I would say is, obviously, any Christian, there's a familiar debate to anyone, which is you're accountable for your actions and you have to repent for your actions, and somebody else's business is their problem. It's between them and God. With relation to the substantial question there, again, this is a question of orthodoxy for the Church of England. I think it goes back to something we've said before on the show, which is the Church of England is a church attached to a state, and it's attached to a state which is a liberal democracy. What we've seen over the last 100, 150 years is a transition to where we say the individual is more and more and more important. Individualism has upsides, it has downsides. We don't need to debate those today. But I think what you're saying, particularly with the church in the West, or just broadly faith, and what's interesting is Islam completely rejects this, right? Is this praise and attention and veneration of the individual, which is often at odds with millennia-old principles and values that we've inherited from various faiths. And it does feel like Western Christianity is moving in a different direction to other faiths like Islam. And again, that's just an observation.
No, it's a good one. And I think that Aaron's spot on there, and that we are making gods of ourselves. And this whole trans thing, this whole having an archdeacon that is trans, is, again, it's all about self-identity. It's all about the individual being the god, rather than redirecting our gaze towards someone greater, someone bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I've had this sense for a very long time, and I've church hopped all over the country, and sometimes you look around yourself and you think, I don't know whether even the clergy believes in the gospel. I don't know whether they really believe in this. And, you know, Orwell even writes about this going back well into the 1920s. It's obviously been a phenomenon that's been taking place for a very long time. But I think fundamentally the Church of England, because it is the state church perhaps, and I would never make an argument for disestablishment because I know we disagree on that, but I think that the church feels that it needs to become like society in order to justify its own existence.
That's right.
And the problem is that if it does that, it ceases to be the church, because the whole purpose of a church, of a religious belief, of this the most basic Christian idea of preaching the gospel, you cannot do that whilst becoming like society. And if they think that's going to get more bums on pews, I think we've seen, and Justin Welby actually took some personal responsibility for this the other day, I think we've seen that it doesn't get bums on pews, it's the opposite. It's chasing people away from the church, because what they want when they go to church is sincerely held convictions and beliefs. And that's not to say that churches are dogmatic and not welcoming, but they want sincerity and authenticity. And what they get from the Church of England is this weird pagan wellness cult that they've basically become.
Well, I'm with you on that, and I do want to get, I know you're flirting with Catholicism, I do want to get to that at some point. Maybe we can turn that into a debate on a future episode. But this is also the subject of my Twitter poll today. I'm asking, with so many churches celebrating Pride Month, and this week alone we've seen climate cultists in Bristol Cathedral and the promotion of a trans archdeacon in Bolton, has the Church of England ditched Christianity for a new religion? Answers, yes, the religion of woke, or no, they're just getting with the times. You've another 15 minutes or so to head over to Twitter and cast your votes. Plenty more to come on my Common Sense Crusade, and next we will be discussing Claire Page's attempt to make a sex education charity publish a lesson it taught her daughter.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. Mother, Claire Page, this week lost her case as she attempted to make a sex education charity publish a lesson that it taught her daughter. Claire's 15-year-old daughter returned confused from a lesson in September 2021, saying she'd been told to be sex positive and that heteronormative society was a bad thing. A first-tier tribunal has now ruled that the School of Sexuality Education can keep details of the lesson private due to rules relating to confidentiality and the charity's commercial interests. Claire has been instructed, she's instructed her lawyers to appeal and hopes to take the case to an upper-tier informational tribunal. Here to discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome the Director of the Family Education Trust, Peter Williams. Peter, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
This is a complicated one. Let's give our viewers a bit of a synopsis. So Claire's daughter returned to her from school after having been taught some quite sketchy content in the classroom, and Claire was upset about this. Tried to find out what the lesson content was. The school was guarded because they're using a third-party external resource. And what happened after that?
Well, she makes an FOI request.
Right.
This is denied by the school on the basis that this is from a third-party organisation. This then goes to a tribunal, and a judge has decided that actually, no, the commercial interests of this organisation trump the right of a parent to actually see this material that's been exposed to her child. So actually, we've had the school see it, we've had an information commissioner see it, we've had a judge see it, but we actually haven't had the parents see it, which should be scandalous.
It is scandalous because they're saying the commercial interests of the third-party company trump the child's welfare.
Exactly.
And by commercial interests here, we mean that they're afraid that someone might copy their resources and there's a copyright claim there. But surely if that's the case, schools shouldn't be able to teach that content. Surely the priority should be for parents to know what their child is being taught.
Exactly. Well, what we're seeing is a prioritisation of what I can only describe as a sex education industrial complex of not only these third-party organisations and their commercial interests, but also the educational establishment and the political establishment over this kind of ideology that is now being fed as a part of institutional capture throughout the system, from schools right up to the DfE, the Department for Education, and then also the indoctrination of children that is coming as a result of that.
What got me so riled up about this one, Peter, is that the judge acknowledged that the content was controversial and that it was teaching practices and ideas that are worthy of public scrutiny, but still ruled against Claire.
Exactly. Well, if we're going to have RSE, and what often happens with this is that people can have their children taken out of the S bit, the sex bit, but the R and the health bit as well, RSHE, that is the means by which these activists actually get their ideology in. So if we're going to have this, then there should be total transparency. The family is the foundational and natural unit of society. It has a deserving of the protection from society and the state, and not only that, if that is the case, then there has to be transparency and parents have to be the primary educators of their children. And if you don't have that transparency, that can't function. Instead, children are subject to the interests of activists rather than the parents themselves.
Absolutely. I would say that children belong to God, but other than that, they belong to their parents,
Absolutely.
not to the state and not to the school.
That's right.
That's bonkers to me. But this RSE curriculum that you just mentioned was brought in by the so-called Conservative government, and you're quite right that the sex elements are still optional. Parents can take their children out, but the relationship part is obligatory.
That's right.
However, the way it's taught is that these are interchangeable, and actually schools are struggling because teachers are not trained in how to teach sex education or relationship education.
No.
So they're recruiting these outside resources, whether they are people coming into schools or literal resources that they're teaching, and they are what have been infiltrated. So even if schools don't have activist teachers, they're bringing activism through the back door.
That's right. And that's utterly unacceptable. There has to be a prioritisation of the rights of parents as ordinary citizens who are being a part of the educational system, and their children are part of the system. There has to be reprioritisation and centralisation on them and their rights as primary educators of their children, not these activists, not the educational establishment who think they know better.
I want to bring my panel in a minute, but I just want to note that the judge ruled that some of the materials were not suitable for children. That's a quotation there, and also that it was intro activist. So I'm struggling to get my head around the idea that a judge has looked at all this content and said, actually, we shouldn't be teaching this to kids. But at the same time, I said, parents are not allowed to look at it. How do we move past this? Where do we go? How do parents reclaim their rights?
Well, I think there has to be firstly, there has to be a recapture of the system. I think I would encourage as many people to become governors of schools, because actually governors have a lot of power over these kind of areas. I think that's really hugely important. But at the same time, there has to be some kind of political reform to make sure that parents have a statutory right to this kind of, to certainly some transparency. Also, I don't think RSE should be at all compulsory. I think it should be entirely something which is optional for parents. And then again, it should still be a matter of negotiation between parents, the schools, anyone else they want to involve.
I would agree. I would say this is stuff that parents should be teaching their children and not schools. I'm going to come to my panel now. Emma Webb, some of the lesson titles that I've looked at online from this resource centre say, well, they're called Orgasm O'Clock, Babe's Guide to Sex Toys, Erotica and Pornography, Magic Wands, Fun for All the Family, Queer Sex, The Problem with Heteronormativity. Now, would you want your children to be taught this stuff?
No, and that was not something that I ever wanted to hear you say, Calvin, reading those out.
Indeed.
I think it's pretty horrifying. I would immediately pull my child out of the school just simply because I don't think if you can't trust them with this, making the decision to use that third-party provider, then you can't trust them full stop. I think fundamentally that so two things. Firstly, you mentioned in this judge's ruling, it's very clear that this contradicts the government's advice around indoctrination in schools and highly politicised, contested ideas being taught in schools. So that's one thing, and that's part of the case that's going to this higher court. The second thing is that if the court is ruling that the commercial interests of the company are more important than the public interest, given that the Education Secretary actually wrote to schools, I think it was in March this year, saying that all materials should be made available to teachers, there should be a straightforward ban on using any third-party providers that cannot disclose that material because of their commercial interests. Those are not organisations that are fit for operating in schools if they can't share that material. And frankly, I think it's a bit suspect if there's any organisation working in a school that wouldn't want to be completely transparent with parents and accountable.
Of course it is.
It would at least, by the way, be possible to put it up on the school website or some means by which that would happen, an intranet or some description, rather than just put it out into the public realm. That way the parents could see it and it wouldn't be a problem commercially. So there should be some means.
Aaron, what's your take on this?
Well, there's some points of agreement and disagreement. I think, first of all, I think RSE is good, personally. I think it's good to teach young people that not everybody is like you, not everybody thinks like you. You live in a society where people disagree, and we need to teach children to mediate those differences properly. But then on the specifics of this, I think the IP, the intellectual property arguments, is just so strange. You would think they're talking about, a nuclear fusion reactor. They say if the blueprints are available, people could copy them and it would be a big commercial downside for us. I don't quite buy that for this. But this from the judgment was just remarkable. The Commissioner recognised that in this area, parents have rights to decide what is or is not taught to their children, as you've been saying. He notes that those rights cannot be exercised in a meaningful way without parents being aware of the subject matter their children are likely to be taught. So I don't understand how you can say that and then come to this conclusion. And finally, look, I don't think it should be like a left-right thing. You have a private enterprise going into a public school being funded through taxpayer money, and they're saying, we will not disclose the materials to the parents. This is taxpayer money. Yeah. And when it comes to taxpayer money, everybody out there, whether they vote Liberal, Tory or Labour, thinks that you should have a certain measure of scrutiny with that. So look, if you want to make money and have a business by teaching kids in schools funded by taxpayers, you clearly have to disclose the materials you're teaching. Seems quite obvious to me.
Amen.
Thank you all very much. Peter Williams, the director of the Family Education Trust, thank you for your time today. Next, on my Common Sense Crusade, I will be speaking to comedian Paul Carenza, who will be starring next Saturday in a restaging of the first ever religious broadcast.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. Next weekend at All Saints Church, comedian Paul Carenza will be presenting a very special performance. The first ever religious broadcast will be restaged in what we are told will be a part historic reenactment, part sermon, part dramatic monologue, as a landmark moment is reenacted. What's certain is that it will be entertaining and proceeds will go to the All Saints Big Build project. And Paul joins us now to tell us more. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. Thank you for coming on. Could you give us an outline of, first of all, how did you discover the first ever religious broadcast in this country?
Yeah, so I've been doing a bit of a big build project myself in terms of building my knowledge of the history of broadcasting, really. How it began, of course, radio, and how that affected then the world we're in today, and everything in between. But I love the fact that there are these firsts, and there's so little we know about it. So I did a bit of digging. I must acknowledge a couple of people, a guy called Andy Mabbitt, who helped me, who digitised this first religious broadcast, the findings in the British Library, and a friend of mine, Dr. Jim Harris, who was cycling past a church in Peckham. He saw a plaque on the wall of this church, and it said, "Here, in July of 1922, Dr. James Ebenezer Boone gave the first religious broadcast in Britain." And I was curious by this because this is about 4 months before a channel that you may have heard of called the BBC came into being. And it's often been widely thought that actually the first religious broadcast was on the BBC, Christmas Eve 1922, on their London station called 2LO. And in fact, 4 months earlier, there's this one preacher in Peckham, in his church, and he thought, let's use this new invention of wireless. I love the fact you introduced wireless at the very start of this, to actually send an entire church service out there into the ether for anyone who has a radio set to listen.
And how did that work, and how far would the broadcast have reached at that point?
Well, yeah. So his plan was to do it to broadcast his actual church. He wanted to broadcast the church service, and he applied to the government. The government said no, because if we give your church a license, we have to give every church a license. So he found a factory 5 miles away who did have a license in Blackheath. He broadcast then from there into his church, so that's 5 miles. Not too far. And he had no idea then how far it would reach beyond that. You were never going to get national at that stage. But if the wind's in the right direction, you go a bit further. So he then got feedback. He got letters, not radio feedback, but he got letters of encouragement from Godalming in Surrey, from the East Coast, not entirely sure where, but I think East Anglia sort of area by the sounds of it, a holiday destination over there before there was a Butlins. He got as far as Coventry as well. I think that's the furthest we definitely know for sure he reached, from Peckham. So that's not bad. That's, 100 miles, 150 miles maybe. And the time it was, in very low power operations, that's quite impressive, really.
That's fantastic. We're not quite a religious broadcast. We do have a Christian angle. But last year we broadcast my ordination, which, as far as I know, was the first ordination to be broadcast. I don't know if you've gathered any more in your historical research.
I have seen no evidence of anyone before you, so let's call you the first. How about that? You can have that.
All right, let's get a plaque up on the GB News studios for that one then.
Get the plaque up right now, absolutely. But certainly back then, the early days of religious broadcasting, they were very, very careful. And once, if I dare mention the channel again, BBC started broadcasting religious broadcasts from 1922. Bear in mind, they're the only channel in the country for several decades. John Reith, who was a Christian himself, of course. His father was moderator of of a church in Scotland, the Free Church of Scotland, and he was very particular about wanting to use broadcasting for the nation's soul, and he wanted to broadcast religious broadcasts, but he had to keep the church on side, and he got this sort of council together of church leaders so they could work out exactly what sort of flavour of Christianity, and they decided something around the sort of Protestant-y kind of area, fairly Church of England, a little bit of Catholic allowed on the air occasionally, but that was the sort of the brand they wanted. They thought something that is accessible. This is, of course, just after the First World War as well. So the BBC's first church service.
Well, I want people to know where they can find you as well, and we're running out of time. So if you could tell people where they can see your performance.
Oh, it's a good point, yes. Well, All Saints Church, you mentioned, it's in Guildford. There are many All Saints churches, of course, around the land. We are rebuilding the church building, the church roof of All Saints Church in Guildford. It'll be next Saturday. Come along, see the first religious broadcast brought to life once again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul Carenza, for your time and for joining me this evening. My brilliant panellists, or my dualists, Emma Webb and Aaron Bastani, as well, thank you for your time and your wonderful debates today. Before we take a final break, let's have a look at what you guys have had to say about today's topics. On my monologue, Jan says, I know I'm just one of a massive majority. The militant way pregnancy is perceived, for example, a GP asking whether the pregnancy was planned at the outset, makes me think an ill wind blows for the unborn. Yes, I won't go into it, Jan, but the questions they ask are problematic to begin with, aren't they? Hillary says, I'm listening to the debate on the Church of England. Perhaps the most important thing the Church does is to provide a place for people to meet and support each other through all the trials of life with respect and compassion. It used to, Hillary, but throughout lockdown, when people needed each other more than most, all the churches happened to be closed. On Claire Page's case, Clive says, what we have here is institutionalised child abuse. Yeah, I mean, it's indoctrination. It's foul, and we need parents to stand up and ask their schools what is being taught. Thank you all for your comments this evening. Thank you for tweeting and thank you for emailing. Coming up in the final part of my Common Sense Crusade this week, we'll be talking to Michael Schellenberger, one of the journalists who produced a bombshell report this week on the origins of COVID-19.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant the Big Green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. It's time for Calvin's Concern. Earlier today, I took to Twitter and asked, with so many churches celebrating Pride Month, and this week alone we have seen climate cultists in Bristol Cathedral and the promotion of a trans archdeacon in Bolton, has the Church of England ditched Christianity for a new religion? The results are in, and 89.8% of you say yes, the religion of woke, while 10.2% of you say no, they're getting with the times. Is the truth starting to emerge about the origins of COVID-19? Last weekend, the Sunday Times Insight team reported that scientists in Wuhan were working alongside the Chinese military to combine the world's most dangerous coronaviruses just before the outbreak. And that was followed by a bombshell article which revealed that US government sources say the first people to catch COVID-19 were 3 Chinese scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, one of whom was leading the research into SARS-like coronaviruses. Michael Schellenberger was one of the authors of that article, and he joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. This is really, really important research. It's baffling to me as someone who was in the media when we were shut down a couple of years ago for raising the very thought that this virus could have started in Wuhan. But now you have very firm evidence that that is very well the case.
Yeah, that's right. And you should remember it's the same thing in the United States. The Washington Post had a headline where they claimed that the lab leak theory was a debunked conspiracy theory. There was also this idea that it was racist to imagine that the virus had leaked from a lab, and somehow not racist to imagine it came from Chinese people eating bats or other animals from a wet market. So it was quite absurd. We see this quite a bit, by the way, where people that are engaged in a cover-up accuse people that are revealing the cover-up of engaging in conspiracy theories. But what we found from multiple sources in positions to know in the U.S. government that it was 3 Wuhan Institute of Virology scientists, but not only that, they were the ones working with SARS-like coronaviruses and manipulating those viruses, including with U.S. funding, who were the first 3 people to become sick with COVID.
And we're talking here about gain of function, aren't we? We're talking about increasing the virility and the infectiousness of these viruses. But we've heard all along that there was no gain of function at play, and actually it was outlawed in the United States in 2014 and by Barack Obama, I believe. So is it the case that it seems that this virus was a result of scientists playing around with gain of function?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's important to, our 2 countries are very linked on this issue. You know, there's a Cambridge working group of scientists who are raising the alarm about this gain of function research, which results in making coronaviruses more infectious. And President Obama acted on those recommendations to ban that kind of research in the United States. But Anthony Fauci, who led the response to the pandemic in the United States, basically broke the law, if not the letter of it, then the spirit of it. Moved that research with the support of Francis Collins, who was the head of the National Institutes of Health, to China, and the support of the USAID, by the way, other agencies, into China. And that research went on in this laboratory, which had a very low level of security. You know, there's 3 levels of security in these labs, BSL 1 through 4. It was at BSL 2, and even the researcher talked to said that it may not have even been safe at BSL 4 because the virus itself is so leaky, it's so contagious. So it's quite irresponsible. We deserve answers to this. Some people think that this is not important or somehow this is old news. It's actually part of a broader abuse of power that we're seeing in institutions in the United States and also in the UK.
Yeah, there has to be accountability. And, you know, there's the old slogan that Fauci lied, people died. But it seems that might be the case now. Can you tell us a little bit about the US's involvement through NIAID and NIH and such, and how the US might have funded this research in China?
Well, this just came out. There's a white coat think tank study that just released a report yesterday, which pointed out that the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is the agency that Fauci headed, had funded in 3 separate grants $41 million to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, specifically to Ben Hu and his team, which was part of Xi Jinping's team, to do this research on SARS-like coronaviruses. So, I mean, there's really not much more missing from the story. It's a picture of the U.S. government funding the research that appears to have led directly to the pandemic.
This is absolutely shocking to me, but who do you think needs to be held to account? Is it Ben Hu and the Wuhan Institute, or is it the American government for funding this research? Does there need to be an investigation, an independent investigation, to figure out who needs to be held accountable? And do there need to be some kind of reparations and/or punitive punishment for this?
I think we need what we had after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which is a bipartisan commission with special investigative powers to get to the bottom of what happened. This issue, like so many others in the United States, has been divided along partisan lines, although a growing number of Americans do believe that it's a lab leak. But we need accountability. And I think the other thing that people need to understand, something I didn't understand fully until I started working on this, is that this research continues. They are continuing to do this very risky gain-of-function research at this very moment. There's no proper oversight or regulation of it. We have a stronger push by governments to regulate speech online than we do to regulate coronavirus research in different labs. So yeah, I think it's pretty remarkable that there hasn't been more of an outcry about it. I think there's just been an orchestrated disinformation campaign aimed at stoking uncertainty, emphasizing the various ways in which it might have been possible for this virus to come from nature. But I do think that what we saw with our reporting is that the people that we spoke to in the US government, they're speaking out because they're outraged by the cover-up, by the disinformation. It's gone on for a very long time. I would also point out that the head of the FBI said earlier this year that they had known for quite some time. Our sources say that the US government has known who the first patients were, or what we call patient zero, since 2020. So this has been going, there's been it's a cover up and a disinformation effort. We need a 9/11 style commission to get to the bottom of it.
And in summary, who do you believe is fundamentally responsible for the cover-up, such as shutting down the debate around the Wuhan lab leak and promoting ideas such as it came from a wet market in China?
Well, we know who was, because this has already been released in emails shortly after in late January in the United States. And there's emails that have been released showing that Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins
It comes back to Dr. Fauci again. Sorry, Michael, I'm going to have to cut this short, but I do want to hear more from you, and I understand you'll be on Andrew Doyle's show tomorrow for our viewers and listeners who want to tune in then. Thank you so much. That was the author and free speech campaigner, Michael Schellenberger. Thank you for your time today. Now, each week on the show, we like to end with a closing prayer, and this week we're reading the Collect for the second Sunday after Trinity, and we have Kit from St. Anthony's Boys' School.
O Lord, who never fails to help us govern them, who thou dost bring up thy steadfast fear and love. Keep us, the beach to thee, under protection of thy good providence, and make us have a perpetual fear and love of thy holy name, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Goodbye and God bless.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So it's been an unsettled first half of the weekend, and that's not going to change tomorrow. This unsettled weather is all due to this area of low pressure that's out to the west of the UK, bringing various occlusions in from the southwest, and these are a bit of a focus for some heavy showers and thunderstorms. Now, looking at the detail for this evening, and thunderstorms and showers that we've seen through today will continue tonight and push north-eastwards. There will be a few clearer spells as well around this evening, but for North Sea coast, low cloud will push in as well. And this cloud and some of the rain we've had around today will make for another warm and humid night. So to start Sunday, it'll be quite unsettled for some, with showers already to start the morning. Some places will see a bit of hazy brightness as well before we see further heavy showers and thunderstorms popping up, especially as we get closer towards lunchtime. Temperature-wise tomorrow, though, it'll be similar to today, though where we see any prolonged spells of showers, things will feel a little cooler under those cloudier skies. Now, we do have 2 yellow thunderstorm warnings out from 12 o'clock tomorrow, and this is due to plenty of thunderstorms around during tomorrow evening especially, and these will push northwards throughout the afternoon and overnight to clear Scotland during Monday morning. And this could bring some disruption tomorrow evening, so do check the weather if you are travelling. It will mean that it will be quite a warm and humid start again on Monday morning, but a bit more in the way of brightness, especially across England and Wales, a bit cloudier with some rain across Scotland to start the new week. But further south, showers will soon develop as we go towards Monday afternoon. And not much will change throughout the rest of the week, with showers continuing, though it will stay warm and humid.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here